In the final moments of her life, Dr. Margaret Whitfield made a confession that would shatter everything we thought we knew about intelligence, evolution, and humanity's place in the natural world. For 11 years, this renowned primatologist had been secretly studying a species that officially does not exist, creatures whose cognitive abilities surpassed human intelligence in ways that terrified government officials into burying the truth forever. What she revealed on her deathbed wasn't just the existence of Bigfoot, but evidence of a civilization so advanced and morally superior to our own that it challenged the very foundations of human supremacy. The classified research files she left behind contained discoveries that could revolutionize science, philosophy, and our understanding of consciousness itself. The world is brave enough to accept the truth. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and comment down below where you're watching from. Dr. Margaret Whitfield was 68 years old when she passed away in a private hospice facility in Portland, Oregon, on March 15, 2001, to the outside world. She was a distinguished primatologist who had spent her career studying great ape behavior and cognition at various research institutions across the United States. Her published work on chimpanzee intelligence and gorilla communication had earned her international recognition and numerous academic honors. But her most important work, the research that would define her legacy and challenge humanity's understanding of its place in the world, remained classified at the highest levels of government secrecy until the moment she drew her final breath. The story began in 1978, when Dr. Whitfield was 46 years old and working as a senior researcher at the Pacific Northwest Research Institute in Seattle, Washington. She had been studying primate cognition for over 20 years, focusing on the evolutionary development of intelligence and the neurological basis of consciousness in higher mammals. Her reputation for discretion and scientific rigor had caught the attention of certain government agencies that were dealing with a problem they could unsolve through conventional means. Reports of encounters with large bipedal creatures in the forests of the Pacific Northwest had been accumulating for decades. But recent incidents suggested these beings possessed intelligence far beyond what anyone had imagined. The turning point came when a team of wildlife researchers conducting a routine survey in the Olympic National Forest discovered evidence that challenged every assumption about the creatures that had been dismissed as folklore and misidentification. Camera traps had captured images of beings that were clearly not human, but were using tools, communicating through complex vocalizations, and demonstrating problem-solving abilities that suggested advanced cognitive function. More disturbing still, the creatures appeared to be aware of the surveillance equipment and had begun deliberately avoiding or disabling cameras in ways that indicated sophisticated understanding of human technology and monitoring techniques. Dr. Patricia Walsh, a federal agent specializing in unusual phenomena, approached Dr. Whitfield with an offer that would change her life forever. The government needed a scientist with her expertise to conduct a comprehensive study of these beings, their intelligence, their social structures, their capabilities, and most importantly, their potential threat to human civilization. Dr. Whitfield, Agent Walsh had said during their first meeting, "We're dealing with something that challenges our fundamental understanding of intelligence and evolution. We need someone with your background to help us understand what we're facing and how to respond appropriately." The project, codenamed Deep Forest, was classified at levels that exceeded most military operations. Dr. Whitfield was given unlimited funding, access to cutting-edge research equipment, and a team of specialists from various fields including linguistics, anthropology, neuroscience, and behavioral psychology. But she was also sworn to absolute secrecy under penalties that included not just criminal prosecution, but potential threats to her personal safety and that of her family. The research facility was established in a remote location in the Cascade Mountains of Washington state, disguised as a wildlife conservation center, but equipped with laboratories and monitoring equipment that rivaled any university research institution. The site was chosen based on intelligence, indicating high levels of creature activity in the surrounding forest. Dr. Whitfield's first encounter with the subjects of her study occurred just 3 weeks after the project began. She had been reviewing video footage from motion-activated cameras when she noticed something that made her question everything she thought she knew about animal behavior. A family group of 4 creatures, 2 adults and 2 juveniles, had approached one of the camera stations and were clearly examining the equipment with intense curiosity. But they weren't just looking at the cameras, they were discussing them. The vocalizations captured on the audio recordings were unlike anything in the scientific literature. They were complex, structured, and clearly communicative as sophisticated language with grammar, syntax, and abstract concepts that indicated cognitive abilities at least equal to human intelligence. The linguistic analysis was staggering. Dr. Whitfield would later write in her classified research notes, "These beings weren't just making sounds, they were having detailed conversations about human technology, discussing the implications of being observed, and making collective decisions about how to respond to our presence." Over the following months, Dr. Whitfield and her team developed increasingly sophisticated methods for studying the creatures without direct confrontation. They used long-range observation equipment, analyzed environmental samples for biological information, and developed acoustic monitoring systems that could record and analyze the creature's complex vocalizations. What they discovered challenged every assumption about intelligence, consciousness, and the evolution of cognitive abilities. The creatures possessed a social structure more sophisticated than any known primate species. Their family groups were organized around principles of cooperation and consensus decision-making that eliminated the hierarchical dominance patterns seen in other social mammals. Conflicts were resolved through discussion and mediation rather than physical confrontation. Their tool use exceeded that of any known animal species and approached the sophistication of early human technology. They crafted implements from stone, wood, and plant materials with precision that indicated not just intelligence, but cultural transmission of knowledge across generations. Most remarkably, they had developed what could only be described as science-systematic observation and experimentation that allowed them to understand and manipulate their environment in ways that demonstrated abstract reasoning and hypothesis testing. They were conducting their own research, Dr. Whitfield noted in her files. "We observed them testing the properties of different materials, experimenting with tool designs, and sharing their discoveries with other family groups through what appeared to be formal teaching sessions. But it was their moral and ethical development that truly set them apart from any known species. The creatures had developed a complex system of ethics that governed their interactions with each other, with other species, and with their environment. They demonstrated empathy, altruism, and concern for the welfare of others that extended beyond their immediate family groups to include other creatures and even the forest ecosystem as a whole. They practiced what could only be described as conservation, managing forest resources in ways that ensured sustainability while meeting their needs. They had developed agricultural techniques that enhanced rather than damaged the natural environment, and they showed deep respect for the interconnectedness of all life. Their environmental stewardship was extraordinary, Dr. Whitfield wrote. They had achieved what human civilization had struggled with for millennia, living in complete harmony with their environment while maintaining a complex society and advanced technology. As the research progressed, Dr. Whitfield began to realize that she wasn't just studying an unknown species, she was documenting a civilization that had achieved levels of wisdom and sustainability that human society had never approached. The creatures had been aware of human civilization for centuries, watching our development with a mixture of curiosity and concern. They had observed our technological advancement, our social evolution, and our environmental impact with the detached interest of scientists studying a potentially dangerous species. Through careful analysis of their communications and behavior patterns, Dr. Whitfield's team began to understand the creature's perspective on humanity. They saw us as a species with tremendous potential, but lacking the wisdom to use our capabilities responsibly. Our tendency toward violence, environmental destruction, and social inequality puzzled and concerned them. They viewed humans as an evolutionary experiment that might succeed or fail, depending on whether we could develop wisdom to match our intelligence, Dr. Whitfield observed. They were essentially waiting to see whether our species would mature into responsible members of the planetary community, or destroy ourselves and take much of the ecosystem with us. The creatures had developed contingency plans for both possibilities. If humanity proved capable of wisdom and cooperation, they were prepared to make contact and share knowledge that could help us solve many of our most pressing problems. Their understanding of sustainable technology, conflict resolution, and social organization could revolutionize human civilization. But if humanity continued on its current trajectory of environmental destruction and social conflict, they were prepared to defend themselves and their territory through means that Dr. Whitfield's research suggested would be devastatingly effective. Their intelligence was matched by their physical capabilities, she wrote in her classified notes. They possessed strength, speed, and stealth that would make them formidable opponents if they chose to view humanity as a threat rather than a potential partner. The research project took a dramatic turn in its fourth year when the creatures made a decision that changed everything. They chose to make direct contact with Dr. Whitfield and her team. The first contact occurred on a misty morning in October 1982. Dr. Whitfield was conducting field observations alone, using a camouflaged blind to monitor a known gathering site, when she became aware that she was being watched. A mature male creature, standing nearly 9 feet tall and weighing an estimated 600 pounds, had approached to within 20 feet of her position, but instead of fleeing when he realized he had been detected, he remained still and made a series of vocalizations that Dr. Whitefield's linguistic training allowed her to recognize as an attempt at communication. "He was trying to speak to me," she would later write, "not in his own language, but in mine. He had been listening to our conversations, learning our speech patterns, and had developed enough understanding of English to attempt basic communication." The creature's first words to her were simple but profound. "Why you watch us?" The conversation that followed, conducted through a mixture of broken English, gestures, and drawings in the dirt, established the foundation for what would become the most extraordinary interspecies communication in recorded history. The creature, who identified himself with a name that roughly translated to Keeper of Ancient Knowledge, explained that his people had been aware of the research project from its inception. They had been observing the observers, studying the humans who were studying them, and had reached a collective decision to attempt direct communication. "We know you seek understanding," he told Dr. Whitfield through their improvised communication system. "We decide to help you understand, if you promise to use knowledge wisely." Over the following months, Dr. Whitfield developed a formal communication protocol with the creature community. Regular meetings were established at neutral locations where information could be exchanged safely. The creatures taught her their language while learning more sophisticated English, creating a bridge between species that had never existed before. What Dr. Whitfield learned during these exchanges revolutionized her understanding of intelligence, consciousness, and the potential for interspecies cooperation. The creature's civilization was ancient, stretching back thousands of years through oral traditions that preserved knowledge with remarkable accuracy. They had witnessed the rise and fall of human civilizations, the arrival of European colonizers in North America, and the rapid technological development of the modern era. Their own technology had developed along completely different principles from human science. Instead of dominating and manipulating nature, they had learned to work with natural systems to achieve their goals. Their tools and techniques were based on deep understanding of biological and ecological processes, rather than mechanical and chemical manipulation. They had achieved what we would call advanced technology, but through biological rather than mechanical means, Dr. Whitfield noted. Their understanding of genetics, ecology, and biological systems exceeded our own in many areas, but they had chosen to develop this knowledge in ways that enhanced, rather than damaged, the natural world. Their medicine was based on sophisticated understanding of plant chemistry and biological processes that allowed them to treat diseases and injuries with remarkable effectiveness. Their agriculture enhanced soil fertility and biodiversity while producing abundant food. Their construction techniques created comfortable, durable dwellings that were virtually invisible to human detection and had minimal environmental impact. But perhaps most impressive was their social technology, the systems they had developed for making collective decisions, resolving conflicts, and maintaining social harmony across multiple family groups and generations. They had solved problems that human civilization still struggles with, Dr. Whitfield observed. They had eliminated poverty, violence, and environmental destruction while maintaining individual freedom and cultural diversity. They had achieved what political philosophers have theorized about for centuries: a truly just and sustainable society. The knowledge they shared with Dr. Whitfield had implications that extended far beyond academic research. Their understanding of sustainable technology could help humanity address climate change and environmental degradation. Their conflict resolution techniques could revolutionize international diplomacy and social organization. Their medical knowledge could lead to treatments for diseases that had plagued humanity for millennia. But sharing this knowledge with the world would require acknowledging the existence of the creatures themselves. And that presented problems that went far beyond scientific skepticism. The creatures had made it clear that they would not tolerate exploitation, captivity, or treatment as specimens to be studied. They demanded recognition as equals, as an intelligent species with rights and sovereignty over their territory. They wanted partnership, not subjugation. They were willing to share their knowledge and cooperate with humanity. Dr. Whitfield wrote, but only if we could demonstrate the wisdom and maturity to treat them as equals, rather than subjects for study or exploitation. This condition created an impossible dilemma for the government agencies funding the research. The knowledge the creatures possessed could solve many of humanity's most pressing problems. But accessing that knowledge would require fundamental changes in how humans viewed intelligence, consciousness, and our relationship with other species. The political and social implications were staggering. Religious institutions would struggle to reconcile the existence of another intelligent species with traditional theological frameworks. Scientific establishments would be forced to revise fundamental assumptions about evolution and consciousness. Legal systems would need to develop new frameworks for dealing with non-human intelligence and rights. Most concerning to government officials was the military implications of the creatures' capabilities. Their physical strength, stealth abilities, and sophisticated understanding of human technology made them potential threats that couldn't be controlled through conventional means. Their knowledge of sustainable technology could shift global power balances if shared selectively with certain nations or groups. The decision was made at the highest levels of government to continue the research while maintaining absolute secrecy about its findings. Dr. Whitfield was instructed to gather as much information as possible about the creature's capabilities and knowledge, while avoiding any commitments regarding recognition or cooperation. But Dr. Whitfield found herself in an increasingly difficult position as her relationship with the creatures deepened. They had shared their knowledge freely, trusting her promises that it would be used to benefit both species. They had opened their society to her observation, allowing her to document their culture and technology in unprecedented detail. In return, they expected honesty about human intentions and progress toward the mutual recognition and cooperation they've sought. I was caught between two worlds, Dr. Whitfield would later write. The creatures trusted me to represent their interests honestly, while my government employers expected me to gather intelligence that could be used to control or contain them. The ethical implications of this position became increasingly unbearable. The creature's educational system was unlike anything Dr. Whitfield had encountered in human societies. Children were taught through direct experience and mentorship rather than formal classroom instruction. Knowledge was transmitted through storytelling, hands-on practice, and collaborative problem-solving that emphasized understanding over memorization. Their children learned by doing, by questioning, by experimenting. Dr. Whitfield documented, they were encouraged to challenge assumptions, to think independently, and to contribute their own insights to the collective knowledge of their community. The result was a generation of young beings who were not just intelligent, but wise beyond their years. The creature's approach to conflict resolution was equally sophisticated. Disputes were addressed through a process that emphasized understanding different perspectives, identifying underlying needs, and finding solutions that benefited all parties involved. Violence was virtually unknown within their communities, not because it was forbidden, but because they had developed better methods for addressing the root causes of conflict. They had achieved what human societies have struggled with throughout history. Dr. Whitfield observed, they had created a culture where cooperation was more valued than competition, where wisdom was more respected than power, and where the welfare of the community took precedence over individual gain. Their understanding of ecology and environmental science was particularly impressive. The creatures had developed detailed knowledge of forest ecosystems that allowed them to predict and respond to environmental changes with remarkable accuracy. They could forecast weather patterns months in advance, anticipate animal migration patterns, and identify subtle changes in ecosystem health that human scientists would miss. They saw the forest as a single, interconnected organism. Dr. Whitfield wrote, they understood the relationships between different species, the cycles of growth and decay, the delicate balances that maintained ecosystem stability. Their knowledge was not just theoretical, it was practical wisdom gained through thousands of years of careful observation and interaction. This ecological knowledge extended to their own impact on the environment. The creatures had developed technologies and practices that enhanced rather than damaged the ecosystems they inhabited. Their presence actually improved forest health, increased biodiversity, and strengthened the resilience of natural systems. They were living proof that intelligence and technology could coexist with environmental sustainability. Dr. Whitfield noted, "They had achieved what human civilization claims to aspire to, but has never accomplished true harmony between conscious beings and the natural world." The creatures' artistic and cultural achievements were equally remarkable. They had developed sophisticated forms of music, visual art, and storytelling that served both aesthetic and educational purposes. Their art was not separate from their daily lives, but integrated into their work, their rituals, and their social interactions. Their culture was holistic in ways that human societies have lost. Dr. Whitfield observed, "Art, science, spirituality, and practical knowledge were all part of a unified worldview that saw no separation between different aspects of existence. They had achieved an integration of knowledge and wisdom that human education systems struggle to approach." The crisis came in 1987, during the 9th year of the project, when the creatures presented Dr. Whitfield with an ultimatum that forced her to choose between her loyalty to her own species and her commitment to scientific truth and ethical behavior. Keeper of ancient knowledge and the other creature leaders had become aware that the research was being used for purposes beyond pure scientific inquiry. Their own intelligence network had detected increased military activity in areas near their territories, and they had observed surveillance technologies being deployed that suggested preparation for capture or elimination operations. They knew they were being betrayed. Dr. Whitfield wrote, "Despite their trust and cooperation, despite the knowledge they had shared and the friendship they had offered, they realized that humanity was preparing to treat them as enemies rather than allies." The creature's intelligence network was more sophisticated than Dr. Whitfield had realized. They had been monitoring human communications, observing military movements, and analyzing government activities with the same systematic approach they applied to understanding natural phenomena. They had detected the shift in government policy from scientific study to potential military action. They had been watching the watchers. Dr. Whitfield documented, "While we thought we were studying them, they were conducting their own comprehensive analysis of human behavior, government structures, and military capabilities. They understood our intentions better than we understood theirs." The creatures gave Dr. Whitfield a choice. She could continue her research under their original agreement, working toward mutual recognition and cooperation, or she could leave their territory and never return. But she could not continue to gather intelligence under false pretenses while her government planned operations against them. Dr. Whitfield chose to honor her commitment to the creatures, despite the personal and professional consequences that decision would bring. She informed her government handlers that she could no longer continue the research under the current parameters. She demanded that the project's goals be changed to focus on establishing formal diplomatic relations with the creatures rather than gathering intelligence for potential military operations. The response was swift and devastating. Dr. Whitfield was removed from the project immediately. Her security clearances were revoked, and she was transferred to a mundane research position studying captive primates at a government facility in Nevada. "They treated me like a traitor for choosing scientific integrity over government expediency," she would later write, "but I had seen what these beings were capable of, both in terms of knowledge they could share and destruction they could cause if threatened. I could not be party to actions that would destroy the greatest opportunity for advancement in human history." But the damage to the relationship between humans and creatures had already been done. The creatures withdrew from all contact with human researchers, disappearing deeper into the wilderness and implementing security measures that made further observation nearly impossible. The Deep Forest Project was officially terminated in 1989, its files classified at levels that ensured they would never see public release. The research facility was dismantled, the equipment was relocated, and all personnel were reassigned to other projects after signing additional non-disclosure agreements. The creatures' withdrawal was complete and systematic. They abandoned territories that had been under observation, relocated their communities to areas that were inaccessible to human monitoring, and implemented countermeasures that neutralized most forms of technological surveillance. "They simply vanished," Dr. Whitfield wrote. "Decades of careful observation and documentation became worthless overnight as they demonstrated capabilities for concealment that exceeded anything we had imagined. They had been allowing us to study them, and when they chose to disappear, our most advanced technology could not track them." For the next 12 years, until her death in 2001, Dr. Whitfield lived with the knowledge that humanity had been offered an unprecedented opportunity for cooperation with another intelligent species and had chosen suspicion and potential violence instead. She spent her final years documenting her experiences in detailed journals and research notes, hoping that someday the truth could be revealed and the relationship with the creatures might be restored. Her documentation included detailed linguistic analyses of the creatures' language, behavioral studies that revealed the sophistication of their social organization, and technological assessments that demonstrated their advanced understanding of sustainable living. "I documented everything I could remember," she wrote in her final notes. "Every conversation, every observation, every piece of knowledge they shared with me. I hoped that future generations might be wiser than ours, that they might find a way to restore the relationship we had destroyed through fear and arrogance." In her final written statement, completed just days before her death, Dr. Whitfield made a confession that revealed the true scope of what humanity had lost. "The creatures I studied for 11 years possessed not just intelligence equal to our own, but wisdom that exceeded anything our species has achieved. They had solved the fundamental problems of sustainable living, social cooperation, and peaceful coexistence that continue to plague human civilization. They offered to share this knowledge freely, asking only for recognition and respect in return. They wanted to help us become better versions of ourselves, to guide us toward a future where both species could thrive together. Instead, we chose fear over trust, control over cooperation, dominance over partnership. We proved to them that humanity was not ready for the wisdom they offered, that we were still too primitive in our thinking to deserve their friendship. The knowledge they possessed could have revolutionized human civilization, could have solved climate change, eliminated poverty, ended warfare, and created a sustainable future for all life on Earth. But we threw away that opportunity because we could not overcome our need to dominate and control everything we encounter. I pray that someday, when humanity has matured enough to deserve their trust, the creatures will give us another chance. But I fear that day may never come, and that our species will continue to struggle with problems that could have been solved decades ago if we had chosen wisdom over fear." Dr. Whitfield's confession was discovered among her personal effects after her death, along with detailed research notes, photographs, and audio recordings that documented her 11 years of interaction with the creatures. Her family, bound by the same non-disclosure agreements that had silenced her during her lifetime, turned the materials over to federal authorities rather than risk prosecution. But copies of her research had been hidden in locations that Dr. Whitfield hoped would eventually allow the truth to emerge. She had entrusted portions of her documentation to colleagues, students, and family members who were unaware of the classified nature of the materials. Over the years following her death, fragments of her research began to surface in academic circles, environmental organizations, and indigenous rights groups. The information was often dismissed as fiction or hoax, but some researchers recognized the scientific rigor and detailed documentation that characterized Dr. Whitfield's work. The creatures themselves have remained hidden, implementing security measures that have made them virtually undetectable to human observation. Occasional sightings and encounters continue to be reported, but the organized cooperative relationship that Dr. Whitfield had documented appears to have ended permanently. Recent analysis of environmental data from the Pacific Northwest suggests that the creatures have not only survived, but may have expanded their territories and populations. Satellite imagery reveals subtle changes in forest management patterns that are consistent with their sustainable technology, and acoustic monitoring has detected vocalizations that match the linguistic patterns Dr. Whitfield documented. But they have made no further attempts at communication with human researchers, and their behavior suggests they have classified our entire species as a potential threat to be avoided rather than a partner to be engaged. The implications of Dr. Whitfield's research extend far beyond the existence of an unknown species. Her documentation reveals that humanity was offered an opportunity to learn from a civilization that had achieved everything we claim to aspire to: sustainability, peace, wisdom, and harmony with the natural world. We rejected that opportunity because we could not overcome our fundamental need to dominate and control rather than cooperate and learn. We proved to another intelligent species that humans are not ready for the responsibilities that come with advanced knowledge and technology. The creature's withdrawal from contact represents not just a lost opportunity for scientific advancement, but a moral failure that reflects the worst aspects of human nature. We had the chance to demonstrate that our species could evolve beyond its primitive instincts, and we chose instead to confirm every negative assumption the creatures had developed about human behavior. Dr. Whitfield's confession serves as both a revelation and a warning. It reveals that we are not alone in our intelligence, that consciousness takes forms we have never imagined, and that wisdom exists in the natural world that could guide us toward a better future. But it also warns that our opportunity to access that wisdom may have been permanently lost through our own fear, arrogance, and inability to recognize intelligence that doesn't conform to our limited understanding of consciousness and civilization. The creatures are still out there, watching us from the shadows, waiting to see whether humanity will ever develop the maturity and wisdom necessary to deserve their friendship. Dr. Whitfield's research suggests they are patient, that they understand the long-term perspective necessary for species-level evolution and development. But her confession also suggests that their patience is not unlimited, and that our continued failure to demonstrate wisdom and cooperation may eventually lead them to conclude that humanity represents a threat to be contained rather than a potential partner to be cultivated. The choice is still ours, but the window of opportunity may be closing. Dr. Whitfield's 11 years of research documented not just the existence of another intelligent species, but the possibility of a future where humans and creatures could work together to solve the problems that threaten all life on Earth. Whether that future is still possible depends on whether we can learn from Dr. Whitfield's example and choose cooperation over domination, wisdom over cleverness, and humility over arrogance in our approach to intelligence that challenges our assumptions about consciousness and civilization. The creatures are waiting, as they have always waited, for humanity to prove that we deserve the knowledge and partnership they once offered. Dr. Whitfield's confession is our roadmap to that future if we are wise enough to follow it. If you found this story as shocking as we did, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest investigations into hidden truths. Share this video to help spread awareness about Dr. Whitfield's incredible discovery, and let us know in the comments what you think about this government cover-up. Your engagement helps us continue bringing you the stories they don't want you to know.